Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's Thursday, January 12, 2012. I'm Aaron Dykes, and we are again going to battle for reality against those who would universally deceive, just as in the George Orwell quote. Now, we have some big Hollywood stars in tonight's broadcast. Don't want to give the names away, but Brad Jelena is coming up. So is Paul Joseph Watson, editor of PrisonPlanet.com, with his analysis on Iran. But first, we have plenty of news. Now, Homeland Security is admittedly monitoring the Drudge Report, the New York Times, social media, and plenty more. And no, it's not because some jihadist is twittering, OBL would have been proud of me for my upcoming attack. This is a war on us, as we all know, and Homeland Security is nothing more than a Stasi network. But, of course, we already knew that Homeland Security was spying on the Drudge Report, as well as Infowars and plenty of other places. That came out in December of 2010. People like Congressman Bob Barr vowed to investigate it and were plenty mad about the infringement of civil rights, something to keep an eye on. Meanwhile, cashless society. India implements the first biometric ID program for all of its 1.2 billion residents. Not only is this a gigantic feat, it's a very scary big brother move. Recently, India has launched a nationwide program involving the allocation of a unique identification number, UID, to every one of its 1.2 billion residents, many of whom live in far-reaching rural areas. Each of the numbers will be tied to biometric data of the recipient using 3 different forms of information: fingerprints, iris scans, and a picture of the face, and all 10 digits of the hand will be recorded, as well as both eyes. And Aaron Sains of the Singularity Hub is quoted in here saying he wouldn't be surprised if it went on to be part of a cashless payment system. In fact, writes Brandon Turbeville, the author of this article, this is exactly the intention with India's new biometric ID program. In fact, the cashless society is the stated goal of the UID program. CEO of Mindtree's IT Services, the company awarded with the government contract for development and maintenance of the UID, explained in an interview with Computer Weekly that the ID scheme will support a cashless society. He said all vendors will have a biometric reader and citizens can pay for things with a fingerprint scan, even a bag of rice. Not only is this incredible, it's very sad, especially given the fact that Gandhi, father of the Indian nation, started his protest in South Africa against biometric systems created by the eugenicists, no doubt. Including fingerprint cards and identification cards. They burned them in protest, but now India has turned its back on their founding father and implemented an awful, far-reaching biometric program. And, of course, it's coming to the rest of the world as well. Another test case. Meanwhile, scientists find that people are addicted to computer use, especially on the Internet. Internet addiction has, for the first time, been linked with changes in the brain similar to those people addicted to alcohol, cocaine, and cannabis. In a groundbreaking study, researchers used MRI scanners to reveal abnormalities in the brain of adolescents who spent many hours on the Internet to the detriment of their social and personal lives. They found that the white matter fibers of the brain connected to everything from emotional processing, attention, decision-making, and cognitive control were all affected. And in some ways it's a no-brainer, but at the same time they found that people who are addicted to online games are particularly vulnerable to the addiction, many of them staying up all nights playing it and the rest of it. Meanwhile, Dr. Andrew Wakefield has sued the British Medical Journal and journalist Brian Deer for defamation because he had to, because it's common sense, but they won't tell the truth as usual. The man who has been shamelessly mocked, repeatedly lied about, and cruelly defamed for his legitimate scientific research into the combination of measles, mumps, and rubella MMR vaccine and autism in children. But Dr. Andrew Wakefield is now fighting back against those responsible for viciously denigrating his work and character by filing a lawsuit against the British Medical Journal, which published lies about him, and journalist Brian Deere, who authored many of those lies. What other choice do you have when they just try to mock you for pointing out that these vaccines are hurting people? It's a lot more than just his name at stake. These are actual, real children being affected. And in fact, when we go to break coming up, we're going to play an interview Alex did with one autistic child. His father said that the autism came up after the second round of shots. I don't recall which one, but it's in the clip. That's coming up later. But just so many children it's affected. There's obviously something going on, and Wakefield is a respectable guy. He's been doing real research. It's a shame that they attack him. In other news, South Carolina officials are investigating 900 dead voters who were found to vote in recent elections. Director Schfado's research has revealed evidence that over 900 deceased people appeared to have voted, quote-unquote, in recent elections in South Carolina. Said a statement Wednesday. An alarming number clearly necessitates an investigation into potential criminal activity. Of course, it's nothing new. They've been stuffing ballot boxes and putting dead people's names on voter registers for a long time, but it's just a reminder that so-called elections have never been fair and free. They've always been controlled by the system. In many cases, different criminal factions stealing elections against each other. So how would an honest person come up? Now, meanwhile, we have video from New Hampshire in the primary where one person did an investigation where they went to the ballots and used dead people's name, and they were given ballots. They didn't actually vote, but we're going to show part of that clip now where they demonstrate how they were allowed to vote with dead people's names in New Hampshire just the other day during the primary.
Democratic ballot. There you go, Mr.
Now, I'll tell you what, I've left my
and there you
ID
can see
in
the
car.
birth date and the death date of the name that they're using.
Not required.
I don't need it. I'll go and get it anyway if you don't mind. I prefer to. I don't need I don't need identification.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Oh boy.
We have you here. You just have to.
Yeah, as long as you're on our registered poll list, you're allowed to vote.
I can just vote, that's okay. Yes. All right, well, I'll get my ID anyway. But thank you very much. See you shortly. Bye-bye.
Here we are, George F. at St. James Place.
That's the address.
Okay, and you're a registered Democrat.
That's the registration.
Okay, so here's the Democratic ballot, and the pens are in the booth.
I haven't got my ID with me, my identification.
You don't have to. In the state of New Hampshire, they don't require it.
All right, there's no way of checking who's voting.
If somebody else came in and said they were George Darcy, we wouldn't let them vote because we've now checked off George Darcy.
Okay.
And that's the only check there is in the system.
I got some ID anyway.
Oh,
I got some ID. I wrote it.
You don't have to go. You can go.
It's okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
You have a Thomas McCarran?
Okay, Tom. Take one of these chips. Go.
And this video goes on and on. It's over 10 minutes long. You could debate if it's a good idea to require identification when voting, but obviously it can play into the hands of voter fraud. They can obviously use black box voting machines as well. Now, I said it was a struggle for reality. That's because we've obviously been following the corporate prostitute media's ongoing attacks against Ron Paul, including the very popular meme that he can't win, that he's not a real candidate. So tonight we're going to award the first ever prostitute media award, and it goes to Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC. An avowed socialist, I believe. I don't want to totally quote myself on that, but I remember seeing him talking about some of his extreme views, but of course he defines reality for us. Let's go to that clip now.
Romney, the projected winner tonight in New Hampshire. Ron Paul, the projected second-place finisher right now with 14% of the vote in.
Then you have to look at the fraud in the campaign, the Republican fraud, which is the libertarian Ron Paul, who is not a candidate for president. He is not going to get the nomination. He is not going to be given a prominent speaking role at a Republican convention. They can't have a guy up there saying what he says. He is in there to push his ideas and for whatever individual reasons he has. So if you take Ron Paul out of this, and if you take out all those independent voters who went out there today for Ron Paul, what would have happened to Huntsman? Huntsman is the real second here. He came in the real second. He came in the real second. He came in the real second. He came in strong.
Yeah, Huntsman's the real winner, a guy who had no pulse in polls for months, and then he was propped up by the establishment after so many other candidates fell off the wagon. It's amazing how many media personalities tell us they can predict the future and really have such contempt for voters. And that's why we're giving him the Prostitute Media Award. But in conjunction with that, I want to read some quotes about the CIA's involvement in media, just as one caveat to how controlled the sad, sick corporate media is. You got the Rockefeller foundations, the Ford Foundation, all these big money interests controlling everything, skull and bones with all these members in the media, including the founders of Time Magazine, Life Magazine, and the rest of it. Here's William Colby, former CIA director in the 70s, saying the Central Intelligence Agency owns everyone of any significance in the major media. You've also got a quote from a CIA operative in a book about Katharine Graham, the head of the Washington Post, a lifelong Bilderberger and total operative. You could get a journalist cheaper than a good call girl for a couple $100 a month. How's that for a prostitute quote? Cheaper than a call girl. That's what a prostitute is, these corporate media hacks. You've also got William B. Bader, a former CIA intelligence officer, saying it's quite incredible spread of relationships. You don't need to manipulate Time Magazine, for example, because there are CIA agency people at the management level. Yeah, those are skull and bones people. Henry Luce, among others, and one of the Harriman brothers, I believe. You've also got Carl Bernstein, one of the two Watergate reporters. The agency's relationship with the New York Times was by far its most valuable among newspapers. According to CIA officials, it was General Times policy to provide assistance to the CIA whenever possible. Those are all kind of classic quotes under the Operation Mockingbird model. Things are somewhat different in the internet age, but all the more reason why there's so many just blatant prostitutes on the cable news channels. So there you go, Lawrence, and many more to come, because there's so many prostitute reporters out there. Meanwhile, you've got, I almost forgot, we have another award for Lawrence O'Donnell here on the inaugural Prostitute Award ceremony. Is it time for that clip, guys? They tried to take away his Prostitute Media Award, but I guess he fought for it. Let's look at this. And so there you go, Lawrence O'Donnell, the Skeksis Award from the Dark Crystal at the very heart of the Dark New World Order system. A little bonus award for you on this inaugural Prostitute Award. There'll be many more prostitutes to come, I'm sure. In fact, the next story deals with that in part. Ron Paul, people call me kooky because they can't defend themselves intellectually. Reporter with Fox and Friends, Gretchen Carlson, asked him if people call him kooky because of his foreign policy or is it some other reason. Ron Paul, of course, points out that they use those terms because they can't defend themselves intellectually. He separately blasted an MSNBC reporter for trying to insinuate that he wanted to hurt the children and cut a Head Start program when he's calling for a complete sweep of bureaucratic waste of money and cutting of programs, not targeting children just to make him look bad. And so let's go to that clip now.
Do you believe that some people call you kooky because of your foreign policy only?
They do use those terms because they can't defend themselves intellectually. If they say my foreign policy is kooky, maybe they ought to look at what's happening. Why is invading a country like in Iraq, who never did a thing to us, kill a lot of people, then turn it over to the Shiites, who are now allies with the Iranians? I call that kooky.
So again, this is all about the false scripted corporate media reality that you're supposed to sit at home and go along with. But if you start talking about what's really happening in the world, as Ron Paul, among others, does so often, then then you're kooky somehow. And you notice how these prostitutes are nice to his face. They kind of ask it in a sense that refers to someone else, but then they snipe him constantly during airtime when he's not actually on. It's all just this undermining anyone who might call in the totally radical, insane foreign policy that's going on, all as they wage covert war in Iran, leading to an overt war. And so we'll shift now to the very important things happening in Iran. It's kind of a big deal that they're starting another war, especially with such an important country like Iran. Central on the grand chessboard, as Zbigniew Brzezinski called it. I know Alex covered this last night, but it's good to point out again that the former Israeli defense official told the New York Times there's a covert war on Iran. It's a prudent strategy, and indeed there is a covert war. There's been all kinds of blowing up of facilities, targeting officials and scientists, and all the rest of it. So many things going on, trying to foment a phony velvet-style green movement revolution there, and anything else they could do to surround the country and undermine it. You notice the whole Arab Spring thing is really part of the build-up to World War III. You can't get to Iran until you bring down Syria and Libya and kind of rebrand Egypt and Tunisia and some of those other smaller countries, and just to keep things chaotic and not too settled in when they move in for the big kill. Kind of a big deal. So they've killed here the nuclear scientist Mustafa Ahmadi Roshan, even as really the truth is the U.S. funded Iran's nuclear program. And even if they did have a bomb, which they don't, it's no reason to scurry off to war. But, you know, I know the viewers out there from this program understand what's going on. It's just frustrating that they continue to brand this false reality, and we're all supposed to go along with it. Meanwhile, RIA Novosti, the Russian outfit, reports that the U.S. is building hospitals in Georgia readied for war with Iran. There are 20-bed hospitals. It's an American project. A big war between the U.S. and Iran is beginning in the Persian Gulf. $5 billion was allocated for the construction of these 20-bed military hospitals. Javeldi said in an interview with the Georgian paper Kerviveris Kronadi, some of those names I didn't pronounce right, I know. But the point is they're starting supposedly American military towns from scratch in Georgia. Saakashvili is leading the project, all so they could attack Iran and kind of bolster towards Russia and China as well. Hopefully not towards World War III, but we all know that's on the table here. Meanwhile, the Iranian president is touring South America, most recently arriving in Cuba. U.S. warns of a dangerous alliance. They've also tried to claim that he visited Venezuela so he can launch long-range missiles from there towards the United States. All kinds of saber-rattling and provoking for this war. Now, will this war with Iran happen? We certainly hope not. But for a closer look on it, we have a report now with Darren McBreen.
War in the Middle East now appears imminent as the United States, Britain, the European Union, and Israel put the final touches on an embargo on Iran, and warships are sailing to the Persian Gulf. Last Friday, the U.S. and Israel announced that they will have a massive exercise in the Persian Gulf. It will include thousands of U.S. and Israeli soldiers and will test multiple air defense systems against incoming missiles and rockets. Meanwhile, Iran will also be conducting war games in the Persian Gulf and have already launched a military maneuver near its border with Afghanistan. Now, there's a lot of war games going on in the Persian Gulf. The United States, Israel are participating in a massive war game. Iran at the same time. Could that be a recipe for disaster?
I think there's a lot of war games that go on all the time of different sizes. I don't know if this is much different.
I don't know if disaster is the word, but I think you're not in a good situation right now.
Should we intervene for Israel? Don't you think Israel has a capability of protecting themselves?
I definitely think there's a case to defend Israel for what it is. Might not be the strongest case, but should we invade Iran for Israel? No, I think that's a weaker case.
I feel like Israel can take care of themselves, but it doesn't hurt to have somebody backing you up.
Well, it's not about weapons of mass destruction and nuclear bomb. It's all about natural gas and oil. Iraq have the oil and Iran have the natural gas, and that's what America wants, and we all know that. But the media is liars, and they tell us all lies, and We just got to go with the lies because they have the power to spread the lies.
Presidential candidate Ron Paul said the increasingly severe sanctions imposed on Iran in response to its alleged nuclear weapons program are steps that will eventually lead to war.
The first thing you do when you go to war, you put boycotts on them and you blockade a country. It is, in many ways, an act of war.
We assume that we have to do it through force, through sanctions and threats and intimidation and secret maneuvers to overthrow their regime. It just doesn't work.
I think we're punishing them. I think it's retributive, definitely. Whether or not it's with the aim of pushing them into open war with us, I don't know.
I feel like if you're just pressing somebody, you're only going to push them more the other direction anyway.
I think that the U.S. has been provoking a lot of people for a long time.
I just think sometimes the United States needs to worry about the United States.
You know, it's really not that many differences between us and them if you really think hard about it.
The people, or would that be the government?
No, the people. I'm talking about the ordinary Iranians are very different from the image that we have of the Iranian government.
Well, what do you think is going to happen to oil prices if there is a conflict?
Well, definitely the oil price is going to go up because Iran going to hold on to the oil. The Middle East have the most oil, as we know, as a fact.
Do you think our economy could take it?
Not right now. The economy is falling, the dollar is dying, everything is, going deteriorating, and there's no solution right now.
I mean, I feel like any major conflicts in the world right now are going to keep impacting the declining economy.
Are you concerned that something bad's going to happen out there?
Not I am. We all should be concerned. The whole world should be concerned because it's not about us, it's about the whole world.
Now, President Obama is prepared to use military force to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. And that's if sanctions and so-called diplomacy fail. I'm Darren McBreen for Infowars Nightly News.
And that is another great report from Darren McBreen, but I'm glad one of those persons pointed out that the people are not the same as the government. Certainly, all these governments are bad. And don't forget how much the globalists have already put Iran through, from the 1953 coup to all the stuff with the Iranian hostage deal in '79. Then you have the war between Iraq and Iran, where more than 1 million people were killed. With Rumsfeld and other top U.S. globalists fomenting that as well. It's just sad what happens. In other news, cop killing in Arizona connected to Fast and Furious. Ask the Examiner.com. They've got Maricopa County, where the very controversial Joe Arpaio is sheriff, and one of his deputies was killed in a strip mall, suddenly shot from a perpetrator who came out of nowhere and has not been identified. Meanwhile, the story is potentially nationally significant because there's talk that the gun used to kill the deputy may be another Fast and Furious weapon the Obama administration officials placed in the hands of Mexican drug gangs. Of course, DOJ is hoping that that scandal will not blow open again, but certainly they have their bloody fingerprints all over it. And really, it almost looks like a Godfather-style gang war against people like Arpaio. Love him or hate him, he is fighting against the drug cartels down there and simultaneously against what the Obama administration is doing in that capacity. And it's kind of like they shot Sonny on the causeway with one of his deputies there. Don't need any more loss of life there. They should probably just decriminalize. Meanwhile, a justice memo argues that Obama's recess appointments were illegal. Of course, they have arguments for anything. The Office of Legal Counsel concluded the president has the authority to make recess appointments during a recess, and that Congress can only prevent the president from making such appointments by remaining continuously in session and available to receive and act on nominations. Then you have people like Senator Chuck Grassley saying it's clearly unconstitutional. But why not? I mean, this president doesn't have time for the Constitution. He has time for a celebrity meeting with Johnny Depp and the maker of the Alice in Wonderland film. And now he also has time for Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. I promised you a big star-studded lineup. President Obama is schmoozing with the stars again, this time as Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie pop over to the White House. You maybe didn't notice Angelina Jolie there since she was just another CFR advisor, Council on Foreign Relations member, giving advice or asking Obama to address something or another concerning, human rights, I think. Yeah, that's what they're concerned about, human rights. Yeah. How's that working out? Newt Gingrich denies Bohemian Grove existence. Some people have fantasy lives. More of scripting this false reality and telling anyone who says the truth to shut up and go away and not be in front of the corporate TV cameras. Luke Radowski has confronted so many of these globalists. He also just previously confronted Mitt Romney, the so-called anointed GOP leader. But now we have footage from his confrontation with Newt Gingrich, who's been asked repeatedly about his connection to Bohemian Grove, which he did attend but denies. Let's go to that clip.
I know you consider yourself a Catholic, but what happens when you worship Moloch at the Bohemian Grove? New York Post says that male prostitutes are shipped into the Bohemian Grove. Can you tell us what happens there?
You actually believe all this junk?
Bill Clinton said that Republicans run around naked in the woods there.
As you say, the Bohemian Club? Yeah. That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right? I've never been to the Bohemian Club, but you ought to go. It'd be good for you. Get some fresh air.
And you don't want to know what Richard Nixon said about the place.
The Bohemian Grove that I attend, one time to time, the Easterners and the others have come there. But it is the most faggy goddamn thing you will ever imagine in San Francisco crowd, because it's just terrible. I mean, I never want to shake hands with anybody in San Francisco.
That's the place you attended. It's a secret society. Can you tell us at least who invited you?
You know, it's nice to know that there's some people who have fantasy lives that have nothing to touch with. Nice to have you here. Bye-bye.
You can't answer the question? You can't? Can you answer the question?
See you later.
Fantasy lives. It doesn't matter that the elite meet in secret at their power-hungry, power-grabbing, you know, smoky room meetings, including the Bohemian Grove. It's fantasy. Now, it's not fantasy because Alex Jones, this office, has done so much research on the Bohemian Grove, as have others in the alternative press. Let's look at actual photos from the annals of the Bohemian Grove with some of Newt Gingrich's fantasy life. There's photos of different people attending the cremation of care ceremony. This is from 1990, published date. Oh, and there you have Jimmy Carter, some other bigwigs. Jack Kemp used to be a VP candidate, the Bush father and son team, and Newt Gingrich. Fantasy life at the Bohemian Grove, which he knowingly attended but refuses to speak about because they don't want the little people to know. Some more photos, including Nixon, all from that publication, and Walter Cronkite, too, reportedly the voice of the owl. Newt, my so-called fantasy grove life. That's funny there. Finally, we haven't covered much economic news tonight, maybe because it's a little technical and hard to follow for a lot of people, including myself. So to simplify it, we have a clip here just really breaking down the economic chicanery and scams going on, the Boss Hog clip. Let's go to it now.
Boss, can I ask you something?
Yeah, what?
Why would you extend credit to those carnival people when you know they ain't got a dime in their jeans?
All right, I'll tell you. Because that's the best time to extend credit to anybody, Cowbill. You see something? That lady ain't never gonna sell enough tickets to pay the rent on the fairgrounds, what with a star attraction laid up in the hospital back in Cedar City.
Oh, no.
You see, that promissory note she signed pledges all the show's property as collateral. And if she can't pay the rent, why, all I gotta do is foreclose and the whole shebang. The whole carnival of thrills is mine for 5 cents on the dollar.
And of course, the sharecropping Boss Hog system pretty much is the way it works, just on a global scale. Extended derivatives, looting, but who keeps track of all that Anyway, thanks for dealing with me tonight. I am besieged with allergies and sneezing and all that, but that's not going to keep me from the news when my name gets called up. I also want to mention before we go to our quote of the night and then back from break, a noble lie on the Oklahoma City bombing. Not only do we carry it at Infowars and we need your support, it's one of the best documentaries I've seen. It's so well put together, and I know the crew that made it there in Oklahoma had so many ups and downs. It really is difficult to produce a well-made movie, but this one is so well put together. So many clips a lot of people have never seen. Shed a whole new light on it for me. I think it will for you too. It was so popular it sold out within days. Now they are back in stock at Infowars.com. So don't forget that and many other products we have at the Infowars.com store. Finally, before we go to break and come back with Paul Joseph Watson on Iran, we have a quote from JFK. Let's go to that now. And this quote from the Secret Society speech he gave some 10 days before he was assassinated: "The high office of the president has been used to foment a plot to destroy the Americans' freedom. And before I leave office, I must inform the citizen of this plight." John F. Kennedy. And we are going to break now, and we're going to show you the clip where Alex interviews an autistic child and his father. Just more of the terrible things that are being done to us under the covers, beneath the false reality where nothing's going on and vaccines don't do anything, even when they put in the live cancer viruses. So enjoy.
All right, we're here at In the Fed, October 7th, 2011, and we've been here about 3 hours. I was getting ready to go get on the bus. I was getting ready, in the Fed, I was getting ready to get on the bus and drive down to Houston, where we are tomorrow, and then San Antonio the next day. And I walked over to the police, some of which were smiling, but others which were laughing. And I said, listen, autism was 30 years ago 1 in 25,000. Now it's 1 in 58. Brain degenerative stuff is off the charts. Cancer's tripled. Diabetes has tripled in a decade. I've got all the government documents where they're killing us, and some of the cops were laughing. And I was warning them about their families, because they're not going to listen now. But as more and more people get sick in this soft kill system that the globalists have launched, people are going to wake up.
Monsanto corn.
Our life cycle is 20 years per generation. So remember, when your children die of cancer and are sterile, and this poor child brain damaged by the shots, remember what you're facing. Remember this wasn't a joke.
Remember what you're protecting.
When you're lowering your kid into the grave, or when your wife's dying at 35 of cancer. I came here and I watched it. They did it. They did it all. You understand that? Hey, how you doing?
God bless you, brother.
Hey, God bless you. An example is within 3 generations in guinea pigs and rats, with all the major GMO crops, there's almost complete sterilization and massive mental retardation in all mammal species fed 3 generations of major GMO crops. This is done on purpose. This is the globalists, the White House science czars said they want to put stuff in the food. But the chemical bioweapon they've launched on little boys, I was over telling the cops, warning them, because we're all in this together, and people that feel like they're part of the system don't understand. And it was kind of funny to some of them. Others were, took it serious. And this gentleman said, no, right here, my son. Now, 1 in 25,000, 1 in 58. Cancer, tripled. They're killing us. And I've covered all the documents, all the plans. It's all declassified. But people can't face up what they're doing to us. HIV was created, everything. They learned the Nazis just mowed people down with tanks. Now they put it in your food and your water. The fluoride, all of it. It is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. And so this gentleman came over and volunteered for he and his son. His son's autistic, to talk about what vaccines did. Sir, tell us your name and what happened to you. Here's the mic.
My name is Jimmy Beckway, and several years ago, Sean Michael here, my second son, who's 10 years old, he received a vaccine, and a little while later, he started exhibiting symptoms of autism. And according to the MD who's treating him alternatively, it was definitely the vaccines which caused this. And you can do research on the internet anywhere and find out about it, what all it's doing. Like Alex said, now 1 in every 58 children is autistic. There has to be something going on, and it is the vaccines.
When I first had Evan diagnosed with autism, there wasn't much of anything. I had to find out about biomedical treatment on the internet after I typed in autism on Google. And out 3 years later, now there's 3 books and many thousands of children getting better because of biomedical treatment.
Jimmy brought so much focus to this problem.
And kind of that's why I'm here, is I want to bring as much focus as we can to this problem.
I will never give either one of my 2 children a vaccine again as long as I live. Even if it means my death, I will not give them a vaccine.
People are most definitely waking up to the fact, because respectable, mainstream, professional, entirely intelligent people are now realizing for themselves that this is affecting their families. You know, if autism doesn't affect you now, then it certainly will in the future, because the numbers are going up so quickly. So people are coming to the realization in the saddest, most tragic possible way, and that is a personal experience of the problem. And it's just too big now to brush under the carpet.
People ask, well, I'm not scared of you. How could I be? We're going to defeat you murderers, and we know what you're doing. And you are going to be defeated, and humanity's going to rise up, and there's going to be a Nuremberg, and you're all going to pay for what you've done. You think it's cute what you've done? We see you, and more of us see you every day. And vengeance and justice is coming for you, Nazi murderers. You understand that? For all the killing you've done, you're going to pay for it, and we know who you are. Remember that. All right, that's it. God bless you all. Son, come here. Thank you for the courage, sir.
Have a good day.
Hey, we're going to defeat him, and you're going to save a lot of people by talking to us.
I hope so.
And we are back on the Infowars Nightly News. Joining us now for an in-depth look at the build-up to war in Iran is PrisonPlanet.com chief editor Paul Joseph Watson. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Aaron.
Paul, there's obviously been a lot of tension and saber rattling. Today you've got a fresh article, 3 U.S. warships patrol near the Strait of Hormuz. There's been ships on all sides of the coin. What do you see as the most important in this overall buildup towards war with Iran right now?
Well, there's 3 aspects of it that have come out, especially over the past week or so. Number one is that buildup of warships, which you just mentioned, which is the drumbeat for war. They already had, of course, the Stennis, USS Stennis, stationed in the 5th Fleet, and now it has been announced. Actually, we reported it over a month ago that the USS Abraham Lincoln is also on the way to join the USS Stennis, along with the Vincent. So you're going to have 3 strike attack aircraft carriers right off the coast of Iran near the Strait of Hormuz, ready in place for any eventuality. So you've got that. You've also got the financial aspect of it. The rial, Iran's currency, has been devalued against the dollar by 20% as a result of these crippling economic sanctions. The breaking news on that front is actually that the EU-Iran oil embargo, which would have only worsened the economic attack on Iran, has been delayed by 6 months. So they're kind of backing off on the economic front, but still Iran's economy is being devastated by these sanctions, which they admitted in the aftermath of this bombing assassination yesterday. The sanctions are an attempt to instill chaos and instability within Iran, and they hope that that will foment a colour revolution from within the country to topple Ahmadinejad's regime. So you've got the warships, you've got the economic attack on Iran, and of course you've got the blatant covert war which is already taking place, which manifested itself yesterday with this assassination, which came out was the work of MEK, which of course is a US-backed terror group that is now in the process of being taken off the US State Department terror list in association with the Israeli Mossad. So Iran is being besieged on 3 different fronts right now in the build-up to this war, which is in fact already taking place.
But of course the covert war has been going on for some time, definitely more than 6 months. They've had different research facilities targeted, places that exploded, attempts on Khomeini's life, as well as Ahmadinejad and all these scientists too.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it's been going on since at least 2007, when the Bush administration announced that it would financially and militarily support all these terror groups, not only MEK, but also the Jundullah group and other groups linked actually to al-Qaeda terrorists who supposedly were told masterminded 9/11. So it's a continuation in foreign policy from Bush to Obama, with these groups, as he said, attacking military bases, killing scientists, and generally trying to sow seeds of instability which will force Iran in some form to strike back, which of course will provide them with the pretext to invade.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we know that Iran is one of the many countries there in the Middle East and Central Asian region that's on a globalist hit list. It has been for some time. You mentioned 2007. They really looked ready to go to war at that time. They backed off because there was so much opposition to it. Now that we look forward to the 2012 elections, how big of a factor will Ron Paul be? The media is desperately telling us he can't win, he can't win. That's not clear. He continues to gain his support, but even if he doesn't win the nomination, he may still have a big influence, particularly on this whole propaganda to go to war with Iran. That's been one of his major talking points consistently for years.
Well, of course, because Ron Paul is the only Republican candidate who's repudiated this march to war, pointing out that, you know, Iran is a signatory to the NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, whereas Israel is not. Israel has, you know, some 400 nukes. It's surrounded by protective U.S. military bases, which are all targeted towards attacking Iran. And Iran is completely isolated. I mean, they subject themselves to inspections by the IAEA, who have said they've weaponized the uranium up to a level of only 20% when 95% is needed to make the bomb. So all these factors suggest that what Ron Paul said during the debates is exactly right. So as he said, you could get this situation where they're planning to tie it into some kind of October surprise with the Obama administration, whether it's a Ron Paul or a Mitt Romney that is running against him. Because remember, we wrote articles about this around a year ago. Top neocons intimately tied in with the Israeli lobby came out and openly said to Obama, if you attack Iran, we will support you. So that's the only ticket that many people see Obama has to, you know, getting re-elected, is to go ahead and attack Iran and pose as this war leader and then claim that you can't, you know, change horses in the middle of a race, just like Bush did in 2004.
And of course, the classic October surprise was the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis, which was itself tied in with the Iran-Contra scandal, which helped push Reagan into office, take out Carter, another globalist puppet. Your comments on that, Paul, because it's been a long time coming, this longer war against Iran for global domination.
Well, precisely, but they need the right pretext. I mean, it's interesting. Today there's an article actually cut by Avi Perry out of the Jerusalem Post, and this is a former Israeli intelligence official. He says, quote, the Iranian attack on a military vessel, on an American military vessel, will serve as a justification and a pretext for a retaliatory move by the U.S. military against the Iranian regime. And he basically makes the point that a U.S. military aircraft carrier is going to sail into the Strait of Hormuz, just as it did a couple of weeks ago when Iran said, you know, get out and don't come back. And Iran is going to attack it, which will provide the pretext for a wider war. But of course, we know back in January 2008, there was a similar situation in the Strait of Hormuz where this U.S. warship was in the area, supposedly got a warning from Iranian PT boats that they were going to attack it. Of course, the tape turned out to be completely bogus, but it led to a discussion, according to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh in Dick Cheney's office, about how they could create the right incident which the American public will support by creating this false flag attack at sea where Iran supposedly attacks a US vessel and then America and Israel is forced to respond. So it's interesting that top former Israeli intelligence officials are now floating that exact scenario which would provide the perfect pretext for an attack.
Well, I want to say this about the pretext, because we know all these think tanks have done extensive studies. I think it was Brookings that did Which Path to Persia, and it considered a number of scenarios, the kind of false flag attack, also building a cover revolution, building up resistance, using sanctions, airstrikes, all kinds of different scenarios. The question is, which model are they planning to go with? But the final question I put to you on Iran is, what do they think about all these military and intelligence experts coming forward, either supporting Ron Paul's candidacy or saying, no, we don't want a war with Iran? There's been a lot of people coming forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, the most contributions financially out of all the Republican candidates combined, as well as more than Obama, go to Ron Paul, because there's a significant portion in the military who see through this. They see through the deception with Iraq and the whole weapons of mass destruction farce, and they see it repeating again. So whether there's resistance inside the military remains to be seen. But we know for a fact that, I mean, the US and Israel admit launching cyber attacks against Iran. They've decimated Iran's economy with these economic sanctions. They're killing their scientists. They're blowing up military bases, sending warships to patrol their waters. And we're told Iran is the belligerent party in all this. I mean, if China were doing all that to the United States, if China were sailing, warships in the Gulf of Mexico, what would the response be? Iran is already under attack through all these methods, and it's only going to intensify the closer we get to this crucial election for the Obama administration.
And we know it's a danger on the homeland, too. They've already tried the false flag where the guy supposedly tied to Iran, who was from Texas, was going to help the drug gangs assassinate the ambassador. That didn't work. It didn't sell to the public, but they'll probably look to stage something else, Paul.
Well, precisely, and they've, according to polls, 50% of the American people already support an attack on Iran. So they've already got half the country hoodwinked, and they probably just need to tip that balance to go ahead. And eventually it's going to come back on America because, of course, China gets all their cheap oil through Iran, and this is partly about curtailing Chinese influence in the region. I mean, Obama just came out a few days ago and said the primary focus of America's empire over the next 5-10 years is the Asia-Pacific region. So they're already moving to knock over the last few dominoes in the Middle East, and they're moving towards Asia, moving towards that confrontation with China, which this is a pretext and an hors d'oeuvre for.
It's hard to imagine that it won't just further destroy the economy. Let's hope they don't do this war with Iran. Paul, thanks for joining us, and we'll, of course, speak more with you on that as there are more updates, and you'll be publishing articles at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Good evening, and thanks.
Thanks, Aaron.
And that's it for tonight's Infowars Nightly News. Don't forget, we have specials for those who are willing to help support this broadcast and join PrisonPlanet.tv. You can get 44% off of a membership right now, I believe, or you could try the 15-day free trial, see everything that we have to offer, and decide then if you want to support us. We do count on that support. We're not supported from bailouts or big corporations like the prostitute media you see on television. So help us get that message out and reach more people before it's too late. Good night.